to Red Pill Politics with Dan Wos and Lynne Roberts. Today is April 27th, the year 2018.
Well, howdy there, patriots and obedient vassals. Welcome to another big old dose of Red Pill Politics. The show that is not FDA approved. Can only mean one thing, probably won't kill you, and you just might learn something. I'm your opinionated, abrasive host, Dave Kopacz, and I want to welcome everyone to the show. As you know, I've been advertising this for a while. We got a big Second Amendment rally, our 5th annual Flag Day Second Amendment rally coming up. And I'm one of those people that believes we should be celebrating the Second Amendment every day. So as we build up to that event, I thought I'd get some great guests on, have one of our shows, and really talk up the issues here that are most important. So I couldn't think of two better guests than Lynne Roberts, the president of the Massachusetts Second Amendment Sisters, and Dan Wos, who is the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. So I want to welcome both of my guests to the show, and thank you very much for coming on. We're going to talk about real issues. We're going to talk about the Second Amendment, what it stands for, what it represents. We're also going to talk about those that think the Second Amendment is antiquated, and we're going to go through the importance of this, how they're chipping away incrementally at our rights. So we're going to cover a lot of territory today, but first I want to give each of my guests a little chance to say a little bit about themselves. Lynne, please take the floor and tell us what you've been doing.
Hi, my name is Lynne Roberts, and I'm the state coordinator for Second Amendment Sisters of Massachusetts. And what I've been doing for the last 15, 18 years in volunteering, running this organization, is introducing new women to shooting, women who have not shot before and don't know anything really about the Second Amendment and what it really means. That is the main mission of Second Amendment Sisters, is really to educate women especially about what the Second Amendment really means. Because in my opinion and in our opinion, women are crucial to protecting the Second Amendment. Women are very crucial. Their voice needs to be heard. They need to understand it. Most of the times, a lot of them are mothers, and all of this stuff is happening around them, and they have no idea. They go to the voting booth, and they say, "Oh, vote for this anti-gun bill for the safety of the children." Well, the safety of the children is if you can defend the children. If you're just armed, how can you defend yourself? Okay? It's not. People who are anti-gun, what are they? As Dan will start talking a little bit later about, you need to ask them the question, you're anti-gun, you mean you're anti-self-defense? You're anti-freedom? You're anti-liberty? You explain that to me. So what we're about is teaching women about this issue. That guns aren't scary just because they're guns. Ooh. You know, oh my God, there's a gun in the house, and they're freaking. It's like, you know, oh no. And I mean, in the past 18 years, I have to say this, I've met the most wonderful women that I've ever met in my life. And a lot of them, when they first come in to see us to learn how to shoot, they've never touched a gun before, but they're there, and some of them are actually, they're really nervous, they're shaking and they're anxious. But I will tell you, by the time they leave, they got a big smile on their face, and they say, "Oh, so this is what it's all about." So now, ka-chink, another good voter at the voting booth. And that's where our focus and our mission is. As well as having a good time and learning and, you know, all the camaraderie and social things that we do.
Excellent.
So is that okay?
It is. Thank you very much. Now, Dan, you weren't always a Second Amendment advocate, and didn't come from, you come from a different place. So tell us what got you here, and a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Well, I came from a pro-gun family. My dad took me hunting and target shooting. but it wasn't really my thing. You know, I was into playing guitar. I played guitar since I was a little kid. It wasn't really my thing. I wasn't against guns, and I wasn't scared of guns, but it just wasn't really my thing. So, he took me target shooting, hunting, and he taught me how to use guns. So I had a base understanding of gun safety and how to use guns and how to properly store them and clean them and use them. But then, when I got into my 20s, I started hanging with the wrong crowd. Hanging with the anti-gunners, hanging with the not necessarily bad people, but people without any understanding of how valid guns are in our society, how important they can be. So I started getting caught up in the, they say you are who you hang out with, and I was hanging out with those people. So I started to actually become somewhat anti-gun. And my saving grace was that my dad taught me before he died about guns. So I had that base understanding. And then there was a situation in my life where I could have potentially needed a gun to protect myself and my wife. It's at that moment that everything just clicked, and I realized that I was on the wrong team. I was on the wrong side of the conversation. I was looking at guns from a place of fear, and I was looking at gun owners from a place of anger, which is what they try to do. They'll try to make people angry at gun owners and hateful toward gun owners, and they'll also try to make people scared to death of guns. I started to find myself in that position, but when I realized that I could have used a gun to protect myself and my wife, that's when everything changed for me. That's when reality hit and human emotion went away, and it just helped me see that all that stuff that they teach you and they try to convince you of with the media and anti-gun, the liberal side of the conversation, it's all a bunch of nonsense. It's all a bunch of marketing, a bunch of propaganda, but it really does work, and it fools people, and it convinces people to think a certain way and to ultimately live a certain way. So I was able to see through it, and once I started to see through it, I started to write. And I don't know, I was never a writer before, but it just happened. The book just happened, and it just unfolded in front of me. And I kept writing, and that's my basic story. So now I'm finding myself through the research that I do and the conversations that I have, I find myself in a position where I'm uncovering a lot of the strategies, the anti-gun tactics and the anti-gun strategies, and I'm trying to uncover a lot of that stuff and help people understand what they're thinking over there, why they're doing it, and why it is that they're so entrenched in their argument and so committed to their agenda, even when the statistics are on our side, the gun statistics. So it's a very complex conversation, and but it's very interesting once you dig deep.
Wonderful. Now, that's a big jump from rock star to author. I was wondering how you made that transition, but I'm glad you did. And, you're doing the homework on this, which is something that a lot of us, we don't do. We fall really quick for those couple of minutes, little sound bites. And that's what is motivating voters, are these little snippets and clips. Now, what Dan was saying is that fear and emotion is a lot of what drives the anti-gun movement. Now, as you worked with women, and the tendency for them, as you've already alluded to, is to be a little bit fearful intuitively. How would you describe, what he said, is that obvious?
Yes,
Did you see
yes.
that in the women you work with?
He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Because they come in and they're nervous about it and they're fearful of it. And but after a few moments, it takes some time to make sure that, once they're relaxed and they realize they can do it, and it's not a big boogeyman or the big boogie thing when they're actually holding the gun.
Yeah.
Right, because we have them hold an empty gun first, and he learn how to handle it and things like that, and they slowly get more comfortable. But a lot of women come in and they're afraid. They're even afraid to touch it in class. you know, but by the time, so Dan is absolutely, his observation is absolutely right. So for the past 18, 20 years, it's the same thing. We do a big annual women's shoot every year, and a lot of the women come in, and they're all nervous, and they're even standing back and maybe deciding not to join in. But after a while, they do, and by the end of the day, they got the big smiles on their face.
Would you say
But
it's the
true.
dialogue, or is it the act of actually holding the gun and shooting, or is it a combination
It is
of both?
the experience. They need to do the touching, the feeling, the squeezing, the shooting. That's what it is. Once they do that, and the other thing that helps, of course, is lots of times, because we just do it with women, and women are more comfortable around other women. So they're more comfortable around women. So they'll be more relaxed, and they'll be more willing to be open about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And that makes them open, it makes them open to learn and to listen. That's a great thing about women. They will listen, and they'll follow. They'll follow instructions, you know, where, I'm sorry, guys, sometimes you guys are, you know, a little bit of a more of a challenge, you know, but it's true. It's true. Once they get their hands on the gun and they fire it and they see that it's not the big bad awful thing that they have been told.
You know what, Lynn, you brought up a great thing, a great point, is that when people don't know about something, they're more scared,
Right.
especially when you have anti-gun propaganda being put in their face every day. Once they get the information, once you learn about something, you get the knowledge, you get the data, that fear goes away. You know, it's like watching a horror movie. I use the example, you're watching a horror movie and you see the girl cowering in the closet, and you see the big footsteps coming up the stairs. You're scared because you don't know what's going to happen. But are you still scared the second time you see that movie? You already know.
You already know. That's why it's the point you made in that first book.
So
too.
it's all about getting the information. Once these people get the information, I've taken anti-gunners to the range, and once they get the information, they learn and they feel comfortable and they feel safe. They don't fear the guns anymore. They actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right.
In my experience, when you've educated somebody and you've pulled them to your side, they've seen enough facts to actually come to that conclusion that they've been deceived and lied to.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is it enlightening to understand the truth about something, but it's my experience that you solidified an activist when they've gotten to that point where they feel not only informed but deceived. They've been intentionally misled.
Oh, right.
And
Right.
I see nothing but fear as we watch what happened with the school shootings.
Oh.
Anytime a politician comes out and they're fixated, you know, the goal shouldn't be how do we minimize guns. It should be how do we minimize the kids that are being killed. All right, and when they're fixated on the guns and not the kids anymore, you know, you got a politician with an agenda.
That's right.
There's a good chance you're going to miss the actual things that are going to help the problem.
Right.
Now, I go back, because I've been harping about this for a while, and I looked up some statistics just on school shootings. And going back to late 1700s, right up to current day, and I looked through, and what I noticed in the very beginning, there was one, maybe two people being shot in the school for many, 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 many years. And what I was looking for, and I'm guilty, I was, you know, I had tunnel vision. I was looking for a certain trend, and I found it. And that was that as soon as psychotropics and things like that started getting introduced into our schools, into commercials on TV, the family units starting to break up,
Right.
those things all happened at the same time. And that's when kids were coming in, not just shooting one or two people, but to wreak as much havoc as they could. The secondary pattern that I saw that went from the 1800s to the current day was those 1 and 2 shooters. Those were still happening. These were by and large kids that were horribly, horribly bullied. They brought a concealed weapon on them or in their backpack, and you know, they used it. The bully came after them and they defended themselves. So in a technical aspect, the Second Amendment worked. I mean, it's always sad when someone dies, But this really starts to shed the light on the problem, and it's not the gun, because we've seen the crazy people who, you know, were not allowed to own a particular weapon still went out and got it. So criminals will do what criminals will do. But we've got a generation of kids. When I was young, first thing my father taught me is how to defend myself. He taught me how to fight. Kids go into school now, and they're taught never to engage, not to defend themselves, look for a safe zone, and they're incapable of defending themselves against a bully. It's like the police.
That's right.
When seconds count, police are minutes away. Same thing with a bully. They're not always going to be able to deal with it.
Right.
So these kids were shooting the bully. And this happens still to this day. So you've got a problem with MIA dads. I'm out there all the time pointing the finger at MIA dads that do not stand up for their kids. We're seeing that the family unit as a whole is being broken up. So this child is horribly bullied. It isn't like they're going to go home and be given good advice or nurturing or anything. Their home life is bad. They go to school where they're a number, they're a statistic. So we have got to look at all the problems, and in my estimation, it starts with the family unit being broken up, because this not only translates to what we're seeing with the school shootings, but I can track this to other aspects, employability, all kinds of stuff. Our kids are not being raised by good, wholesome parents anymore. They're being raised by the state, and we're seeing the ramifications of that. That's the way I see
Being
it.
raised by kids, some, you know,
Yeah.
having,
Siblings stepping up to raise their own younger siblings. It's awful.
yeah, it is, I agree with that totally.
The best thing for a kid is having a mom and a dad in the household. We have dinners together when we can. You know, my son's off to school now, but we always had family dinners,
Yeah.
and we talked about stuff.
You'll know if there's a problem. You're right then in real time.
Right.
And you talked about the gun not being the problem, and it's true, the gun is not the problem. Yet, the anti-gunners will use the scenario gun violence, and they love to push that. But there's no such thing as gun violence. There's human violence.
Yeah.
And we need to address that and hold them accountable to that lie. Because there was just a study in London had just exceeded New York City in violent homicides. And but guess what? They didn't use any guns.
No.
They used knives.
Yeah.
So how can the gun be the problem? It's not. It's a human violence issue being masked as a gun violence issue to push an anti-gun liberal agenda.
Yeah.
And so London now wants to ban
Knives.
knives.
Yes. Yeah.
What was
And
in the
it
paper
still
the other day?
still doesn't get to the
Right.
cause of the problem.
Yeah,
Still
and the problem is really big government. They've gotten in the way a lot. I want to discuss the real issues. Like I said, I think the breakup of the family unit and the bullying in school plays a role. But I almost shudder to say it out loud, because I know a politician, great bullying legislation. And that's not really what we need. We need to divest ourselves of so much government. They've gotten in the way time and time again.
Right.
What can we do as a society to re-strengthen the family unit? So much good can come from that. The gun stuff, it plays a role in the discussion in the schools, only in that the mass shootings would stop almost overnight if we armed half the teachers. If they were armed and trained, look at what happened in New Jersey. One officer heard the shots ring out. He rushed towards it
That's right.
and killed the man, killed the bad guy. No one else was hurt.
Yep.
I mean, that is the way this should happen. These crazy people that want to do harm, and they're just so malicious, it's an open buffet. We are advertising potential crime scenes with these gun-free zones.
I was just going to bring that up, right, it's an invitation.
Hmm.
It's an invitation. You never, ever, ever see a mass shooting at a gun club,
No?
at a police station, right? At the Army Depot, right? You don't know why. Because people are able to defend themselves in those places.
You know, it's the most obvious thing, and I think everybody knows that. Even the anti-gunners know it. How could they deny such a thing when you put a sign up that says no guns and you purposely disarm teachers and staff? How could you deny that reality that that's a perfect place for somebody to come in and do harm, right? So even the antis know this. But here's the thing, they are so locked in to their agenda, they're so committed to that side of the argument that they can't turn back. They can't admit that they're wrong.
Yeah, they're
Because
doubling down
they're
right now.
doubling
It's
down.
all or nothing for them. I think they realize that they may have boiled the frog just a little bit too fast, that if they don't get it through now, enough of us feel something wrong, that we may research deep enough and understand that we've been had.
We've been had, right, and I just want to bring something out. Education, you asked the question about, well, how do we change this? You know, how do we strengthen the families? You know, I mean, government, I think, has a big role in that. And because somebody once said, well, if you want to change the behavior of your citizens, of your taxpayers, then you do it with taxes, like you reward them for certain behavior, okay? So maybe there's some way that the government can kind of rethink what they're doing with the whole, you know, system of taxes and stuff, where they can do something with taxes that are more pro-family, so that there's some kind of a more a support and strength, or even acknowledgement, or even positive, you know, opinions about the importance of family. The other thing I wanted to get to is most of the women that come through our program are not educated on the Constitution. And when you talk to a lot of these anti-gunners of the mean groups or whatever is coming out now, and the safe places and all this, you ask them questions about the Constitution.
What's that?
Well, the Constitution doesn't mean anything. So the point I'm getting to is, and this is, I think, what I've decided to kind of focus on, is what can I do in the world today to help our freedom, to help protect and preserve our Constitution. Well, the thing that I can do, and that I can do best so far, is educate on the Second Amendment. When I get the women in there, we talk to them. Not a lot, but I drop the seeds. I plant the seeds about the Second Amendment. And I say, well, the Second Amendment isn't just about, you know, hunting and target shooting. It's a right you have to protect your family. It's a right you have to protect your neighborhood. It's a right you have to protect and defend your community. It's especially the right that you have to protect and defend your country against a tyrannical government. And it's like it's like the deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
You know, because they've never heard it before.
Yeah. See, you took a long time to explain that out. Well, what I do is I cut right to the chase. When
Okay.
people say, you know, do you need an AR-15 to go hunting deer? And I said, no. The Second Amendment is all about killing tyrants. And boom, right to the point. Because that's what it's about. It is. The Second Amendment is the only place in the Constitution where the word necessary is used.
That's
it's
right.
used in reference to
That's
the
right.
militia,
That's
which is
right.
not a bad word.
No.
Militias are what they are. Back in the day, if your house burned down, your militia brothers would get together. They take in your family. They feed you and your family. They rebuild your house. You were a team. You were an extended family.
That's right.
They were nothing to be feared, and they were to be praised.
Right.
We've
That's right.
got to get back to that type of mentality. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter whether we're delinquent in our trainings or not. Most of us are right now.
Well, you know, the militia also had arrest powers back then, way back then, before 1903 or 1908, when they stripped that power from the militia and they instituted the National Guard. Now, the National Guard doesn't have arrest powers, but the difference between the militia and the National Guard is the militia was led by the citizens. They had a citizen commander. And the militia answered to that citizen. That citizen commander worked with the governor, because it was the governor that would call up the militia, but they had arrest powers and could even go into a government hall and arrest a politician for doing enacting something that was unconstitutional. Can you imagine if we still had that today? Can you imagine what would be going on in our borders today if we still had the militia alive and well the way it should be?
That was as safe as our border has been in decades, is when the militia was down there patrolling the border a number of years
Right.
ago.
Right.
And they weren't out there looking for trouble. They really just wanted to secure the back door of our country.
Right.
Well, you know, you said something interesting. We talk about what people think of the Second Amendment, and I always use this example where people are being conditioned right now in our society to see they confuse rights and privileges.
Yes.
The Second Amendment is a right. It's not a privilege, but they're being trained to view it as a privilege. And you know, a privilege, I always say, a privilege is something that's man-made. It can be given, it can be taken away, used as leverage. And people actually think that it's a privilege, the Second Amendment. It's a privilege to own gun.
It's not.
It's not. It's my right, and
Right.
that's the problem.
Right.
And they talk about infringement. I mean, has every politician forgotten what the word infringement means? It isn't that, you know, we can take half of your Second Amendment rights, or, you know, we can take a quarter or 3/4. It's, don't you dare tread on just the edge. Do not infringe upon any part of it. I am a firm believer that unless you've caused harm, injury, or loss to life, liberty, or property, you should be left alone to self-govern your own activities.
That's right.
The government is not there to babysit, to socially engineer, to tell me what toys and guns and things I can have and cannot have. They're gotten completely
I don't
carried away.
need another group of people to legislate me and tell me how to live my life. I'm a law-abiding citizen, never convicted of a felony. Stay out of my life.
Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and,
Go after the bad guys. Go after the guys who are out there committing crimes, who are out there causing problems in the world. Focus on them. But gun laws, they don't. The gun laws aren't even intended to focus on them. That's the excuse, I believe.
Yeah.
They're really intended to focus on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, you know, we are, in essence, we are responsible for our own safety, for our self-defense. We have to have that ability to defend ourselves. If someone comes in and hurts, if we defend ourselves and hurts us, then the police comes in and they take them away and they do what they need to do with that criminal, okay? And we don't have posses anymore. The sheriff doesn't come down to the center of town and say, let's get the posses together, we gotta go get these bank robbers, right? The police, etc., are there to do the things that we can't do as individuals. We can't get on our horses and ride after the bad guys anymore. That's what the police are there to do. The police are not there to protect us.
And they're not there to revenue
They're
either.
not our bodyguards. They're not there to protect us. We need to be able to protect us. The Second Amendment is the protection of the inalienable, pre-existing right of self-defense. The Second Amendment is not giving a right. It's the existing right that is protected by the Second Amendment.
Yeah, and you know, the Constitution, I was just talking about this the other day, it's like kicking out the legs of a table. You really can't just go and slash away and take out any of those protections without destabilizing the whole thing. The whole
Right,
Constitution
right.
has to be
Right.
there. The Second Amendment is a last resort. I think the reason the First Amendment
That's
is what
right.
it is
Yeah.
for us to use dialogue
Right.
and you know, just
Yeah.
our common sense should prevail.
Right.
As long as everything works right, if the press works right,
Right?
which we got a problem there, we could do another whole show on the prostitutes, let alone the Second Amendment. There's a lot of things that are wrong. If the press did work correctly, they'd be sniffing out the real problems with these school shootings.
Right, instead of making the problem.
absolutely right. Our families wouldn't be so bad off. We've become an entertainment-based society. That's why we're doing a show right now.
Right.
It doesn't do me no good to sit on the side of the bank and talk to my fishing buddies. You can't write a 3-page, well-written article and send it out there expecting anyone's going to read it these days. They want to click and watch something. They want everything immediately. So this is a big mountain. It has taken decades and generations to get us into these entanglements.
Right.
And people have got to be in it for the long haul. We can't have activists that are out there, get crapped on, fall away, and just say, I can't do it. We have got to hang in there and expect that it's going to take decades and generations to unravel these
Unravel it
things.
and undo it, it's true.
Now,
That's
what do you think we are currently facing right now is the worst regulatory threat to the Second Amendment in Massachusetts? And I'm going to ask you the same thing of New York.
Well, in Massachusetts, we're facing an attorney general who thinks that she can make up the laws and that she can make illegal legal guns, like Mara Haley did with the AR-15. She just reinterpreted the law and made the AR-15s illegal in this state on July 15, whatever it was, in 2016. I see that as a big problem when you have politicians in your state that have this disarmament ideology, and that's what it is. And that's what I see as the biggest threat and why we're getting all of this push against guns, because it's a political ideology where they're out to disarm Americans. They're out to disarm so they can disarm us so we cannot stop them from bringing in their centralized, huge, big government control and the whole one world, you know, the whole one world.
No, globalization.
Globalization and...
This is a growing pains to that, by the way. I tell people that all the time.
right.
They wonder
No,
why
I mean,
everything is the way it is.
Right, they look at me like I have 10 heads when I say it. But like you, and I'm sure now like you, I've been reading about it for years now. Say, what is all this globalization? And who are these international bankers that are controlling everything and supporting these groups? You know, all I have to do is mention the name George Soros. I'm sure everybody here knows who he is, right? But it's nefarious and it's evil what he's trying to do, and he's done to other countries, that he's trying to do to our countries. And he's supporting these groups that all of a sudden spring up out of nowhere. Where'd they get the money from? How'd they get the money to bus all these people in? And who is this group? And you know,
across an entire nation, things like that don't happen organically. You know there's multi-millions of dollars being pumped into that.
To answer your question, that is what I see. And then it's a zip focus right back to the Second Amendment and how important that amendment is in our Constitution.
A very common strategy for them on a lot of things, not just gun grabbing, but anything. When they were redoing our health code here in the state, the forced vaccine bills, they float out a whole bunch of legislative balloons. They try to distract us and keep us, you know, which one is going to get me? And if they can divide our attention, you know, they already know what they're going to get behind, which ones are going to wither on the vine and which ones they're going to get behind and try to push. So it's very difficult, and that's why we really rely on people like you, mass gun rights and places like that to dig into this, help us understand where, you know, the political momentum is so that we know how to react, refine our message, and that's part of what this is about. We have all got to come together and start singing the same song. We've got to come back at our opposition in an organized way, coherent, and I've always said this, I've got faith in the collective wisdom of the people out there when presented with accurate information. They'll make the right decision for the most part. Dan, what about New York? What kind of an environment is New York?
Well, we have two very anti-gun senators and a very anti-gun governor. we have a thing called the New York SAFE Act. And anytime, anytime legislation is created, and you can bet that the name of the legislation is the exact opposite of it. Excuse me. So we have this New York SAFE Act, which criminalizes people for having certain attachments on their Armalite style rifles, pistol grip or muzzle brake or whatever. You know the magazine capacity, things like that. So that's very frustrating for gun owners because we like our AR-15s, we like to go to the range, we like to have fun with them. And you just can't in the same way. And it's not like it does anything to solve the problem of human violence. It does nothing to fix the problem of anything. It just makes it more difficult for law-abiding gun owners. That's one thing. The other thing that's really probably the most troubling for people who travel a lot. I travel all over the country, and coming from New York accepts reciprocity from very few other states. So in exchange for that, those other states say, well, New York, we're not going to take your license either. So it makes it very difficult for New York concealed carriers to travel. And so constitutional carry ultimately would be the great thing, but state-to-state reciprocity would be a nice step. It would help people like me and you know, tens of thousands of...
Massachusetts has no reciprocity.
Yeah.
Not a nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, really? Yeah.
Yeah, they're among the worst in the country. Now, what do you think about constitutional carry? Do you think that we're going to see that anytime in the near future? Are there other states making momentum on that?
I think there's some movement there. I really do. And I think we're going to see more movement there as long as we keep pushing and we stay active and we stay on board. More people understand what constitutional carry, you know, is and what it means. You know, and again, it's the education. We're disintegrating this whole notion that because you're a gun owner, you believe in your ability to defend yourself. You're somehow somebody who's to be suspicious.
Great point. Let me jump in on that, because that's another thing. You brought up a great point. We talked earlier about how people are scared to death of guns, people who don't know any better. But they're also very angry and hateful toward gun owners. And they're being programmed and convinced, and repetitively it's drilled into their head that gun owners are irresponsibly and recklessly putting everyone in danger. It's just not true. Gun owners happen to be some of the most responsible, respectful people that I know.
Right.
But the narrative won't tell you that.
No, they won't, because once you become a gun owner, once you have become a gun owner, your mindset changes. Your mindset changes because now you have in your possession, you do have a powerful tool. You have, and so you develop this sense of responsibility and obligation
Become
to
a
make
goodwill ambassador for the...
right, and to make sure, yes, you do that, but you also, on an individual basis too, you make sure that you don't get into.
Yeah. You avoid situations
You
more.
avoid
Yeah,
situations. You become, you know, even more polite and more civil, because you know the power that you have to take those people out if they really, you know, are threatening you.
Your fear level changes with respect to certain situations that
Right.
otherwise you would have been maybe more, or maybe scared. Now your fear level changes, and also your responsibility it changes a lot,
That changes a lot.
and it humbles you.
Absolutely, that's a great word, thank you,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Responsibility is the functional word here, I think, because the degrade that I see in the youth, these kids they feel entitled. They think they got liberty to everything that they're entitled, you know, to right out of the gate. Haven't had a job yet, but you know, I get out of high school, I want a place to live. I want
Yeah,
internet, I want pot,
Yeah,
I
I
want
want-
this, I want that. They want all these things.
I want to start off as president.
Yeah.
A vice president,
Yeah.
okay, all right, CEO.
But with liberty comes equal amounts of responsibility.
Right.
You know, liberty is like a double-edged sword. You can take liberty to the point that you now are infringing on the liberties of others. So personal responsibility, again, is lacking in that generation. I think they view themselves as being largely irresponsible and project that on everyone else in the world.
And you know what else it does? When you take away their responsibility of people, it also makes them dependent.
Yeah.
And when people are dependent, they're more likely to go along with whatever you put in front of them. You know, if they can't supply their own means to eat, and you give them food, they're going to accept what you give them. Just like with the way the media works with people, if they're dependent on somebody else, whether it's government or whatever, they're going to be they're not going to have any responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, they'll take the easy road every
Yeah.
time. I want to thank everyone who's tuning in to the live stream there. We're getting down to the second half of the show. If you have any questions, post them up there. We got folks taking those questions, and we can ask them for you. We have got a long road to hoe. I'm not sure where to start other than the education part of this, trying to uninstall some of the fear that's associated. But, you know, every time the gun grabbers become active, it's almost always after one of these big shootings.
Of course.
So, you know, how do we prepare ourselves now for the next one? You know there's going to be a next one. We still got gun-free zones, so we still have targets for these crazy people. They are going to do it again. How do we prepare ourselves right now? We know it's coming. What is the first step, and what's the message that we got to start? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people do crazy things. The school shootings are probably, you know, a little demographic of their own, but, you know, we look at Chicago and everything that happens in cities like that, where they've just gone berserk with the gun control, and it's completely backfired. You know, we tell people about that, but they gloss over. Why does that not matter? Why does Chicago not matter when we're having this debate, you know, when we're talking to our
Because
opponents?
it's not politically expedient, that's why Chicago doesn't matter. Chicago is a shining example of the failure of gun control and the failure of family and that whole thing. So to answer your question about, so what do we do now? We know it's going to happen again, unfortunately, and it probably is. So in the short term, what can we do? We have to, and this is, Dan and I were talking a little bit about this earlier. You know, what do? We have to speak up. We have to keep speaking up when we hear terms like gun violence, like you said. No, it's not gun violence, it's human violence. Okay?
Stop
And
using their terms.
stop, right. Throw them right back on them and change the term. Change the terms. They, you know, oh, we're pro, you know, oh, we have to do something about, oh, our kids have to be safe in school. You know, well, you want your kids to be safe in
Put some
school?
armed guards in.
Put some armed guards in. What are you doing? If they were there, this wouldn't have happened. We have to be more intelligently and civilly and respectfully outspoken about these issues. And because in the short term, that's all that we can do until we can start working on the larger issues, which is what you were talking about earlier, you know, in getting all of the leaders together, getting us together and getting all on the same page and develop an approach that we're all going to be united on, you know, but until that time, we can only do what we can do, and I think it's important to turn it right back on them so that they have nothing to say anymore, because they will have been revealed. They will have been, I can't think of the word, they will have been...
Exposed?
Exposed is a nice one, I like that, you know, but not dismantled. Oh, well, you know, I'm over 30.
Anytime one of these,
Discredited, I guess that's the word.
Yeah, discredited, yeah, good
That was stretching there for you.
Anytime one of these school shootings happens, it's usually a result of bad policy, failed policy. And so there's very good reason to put armed guards, even armed teachers and staff members who are inclined, of course. And that's another thing. The antis want everyone to think, well, you gun owners, you want everyone to have a gun. Everyone down to the lunch lady. And that's not what we want at all. We want people who are inclined to carry, who are trained, and who feel comfortable doing it. So that's a good thing. They see it as a scary, bad thing, but it's really a good thing. So what I like to do is put it back on them. Anytime they say, the cause is a gun, it's not. It's something else. Go 1 or 2 layers deeper. If it wasn't a gun, look at the person. First look at the person. So now we're looking at the person and saying, well, here's a person with violent tendencies. Obviously, he's violent. The gun didn't make him violent. The gun didn't cause him to be violent. The gun didn't make him angry or make him anything. The gun was just a tool he used. Like I said, in London, they're using knives. We need to focus on the behavioral part of the equation. We need to focus on the people. We need to focus on what's causing them to act like this, to have such little regard for life.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with it.
One of the loudmouth students in this last shooting, she was the one that was one of the most adamant against guns in general. Later came out and admitted that she was the one that was bullying the kid that was the shooter. They themselves are part of the problem. If they can't have a little bit of heart and compassion for someone who might be a little less fortunate, and then just want to burn the house down when they go crazy and kill somebody.
Well, I was never the most religious guy, but you take God out of the family, and this is where a lot of these problems. And I'm starting, as I get older, I'm starting to really understand this. It's an important piece, and when you're kind of trained to not believe in God or not believe, it sets you on a path that it seems to set people on a dangerous path.
Well, undeniably so, because we've got a blurring of as far as an understanding of where our rights come from. We got young kids now think rights come from government, and they don't. They're bestowments of God himself, and not government. Government is a great way to turn a right into a privilege and a dollar into 30 cents almost every time. So they've got to acknowledge where these rights come from, because it is underpinned a lot of other things where you'll see that we need work as a society.
Right, I did a presentation one time at a college in Brookline. It was in Brookline, Mass. Pine College, or I don't forget the name of it now. But anyways, it was a whole group of these college students in the room, and the topic, of course, was the Second Amendment. And what I remember from that talk was they were all against the Second Amendment, of course. I knew it when I walked in the room. I knew what I was getting myself into. Because they were throwing out all the statistics about children. Oh, you know how many children are killed and all this kind of stuff, right? And then this one college student just threw out and said, yes, we can control the guns. We can do this because after all, she said, your Second Amendment, she says, it's a privilege, just like your driver's license. I said, no, it's not. Your driver's license is a privilege, and the government can control that and take that away from you. Your gun rights are your inalienable, your inalienable rights. It's not given to you by government. And she just stood.
Yeah, well, they try to position the Second Amendment as a privilege, and they try to position, while simultaneously trying to position abortion as a right, the right to choose, right? So at the same time, they're always trying to.
Yeah, so we don't have a right to choose a gun to defend ourselves, huh?
Right, so according to them, you have the right to choose whether or not to kill an unborn baby, but your Second Amendment right to defend yourself, well, that's a privilege. That's something that we need to regulate. So,
Look at how the two things just blended together just not too long ago.
Yeah, there we
Who
go.
had the big right to life rally there? Planned Parenthood. Of all the organizations to head up a right to life anything is the ones that butcher and part out the children of this country.
I don't remember seeing abortion in our Bill of Rights.
No, there it is.
No, in fact, yeah.
Thou shalt not kill, I think
What
I
does the
remember
Declaration
reading one.
say? The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yep,
Right?
exactly. And we've gotten a long ways away from that. Now, Dan, you've got two books here. Your first one, you came out 2 years ago. You spoke at the Second Amendment rally. You came out with Jan Morgan, who I think wrote the forward for this.
Yeah,
did
she
you
wrote the
see?
forward to both
For
books.
both of them. This one here, Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. What would readers pull out of that book?
Well, thanks for asking.
Great book, great read, great read.
My little self-promote. Good Gun, Bad Guy talks a lot about the mindset of the anti-gunners. Talks about the strategies and the tactics that are used on otherwise good people, people who just don't know any better. And I talk about the difference between the anti-gunners and the anti-Second Amendment radicals. The anti-Second Amendment radicals know exactly what's going on. They're pulling the strings and they're trying to recruit as many anti-gunners as possible. That's their army. Those are the people who are out with the picket signs, and those are the people who are doing the dirty work to support the anti-gun agenda. So Good Gun, Bad Guy is primarily about the mindset of the anti-gunners and the anti-second radicals. So now, thanks for asking, Dave. Good Gun, Bad Guy 2 is more about the media and how the media influences the whole game. And I think people are going to be pretty interested when they start reading, just to learn some of the strategies that are used on you every day when you're watching TV that you don't realize, but somehow it's uncomfortable when you hear this stuff and you just can't quite put your finger on it because you can't quite establish what they're trying to, you know it's not right. You know they're trying to trick you somehow, something about the question, something about the narrative, something about the landscape of the conversation is wrong. It doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel honest. I uncover a lot of it in these books, and I think the people who have read it have really said good things about it. So,
We were talking earlier, can I say
Yeah,
something?
absolutely.
We were talking earlier about the new book and what's in it, and you mentioned something about the premise.
oh yes.
Maybe just give them a little
Well,
tease on that for the book.
okay, so an example would be, Dave, because guns are dangerous, don't you think we should do A, B, and C? So Dave's going, okay, well, should we do this or not? Should we do A, B, and C? Your brain automatically goes into problem-solving mode, right? Because that's what we do. We solve problems. Our brains solve problems. But you're solving a problem based on a false premise. Because guns are dangerous, don't you think we should? So the question often sets you up to play ball in their court. And what we need to do is we need to understand that that's what the anti-gunners are doing. That's just one of many strategies that they talk about.
Yeah, they present and orchestrate the range of possible solutions.
Right.
They
Right.
pigeonhole you.
Yeah, they pigeonhole
and
you.
they-
Right, as if you accept the premise.
Right.
And we don't accept the premise, but the way
Well,
they,
that's why it's so
the way
uncomfortable.
they frame
Yeah.
the
No,
question
would
is.
you rather be shot in the
well,
left foot or the right foot?
Right, right.
I don't wanna be shot in the
Oh,
foot.
so I'm agreeing that you're gonna
Right.
shoot me?
You know?
Yeah.
Now, the media plays a role in this like they do in everything.
Yeah.
They really have become masters. Those that went to the rally last year, we had Sheriff Joe Arpaio out. And a few newspaper clippings were available. He made news out here, of course. And I did my darndest to try to control the narrative while the press was here. In fact, I dragged them right up on stage and they all called and wanted to interview me. And my security guy, once he had him coagulated up near the stage, I called him right up there. I stopped the show, called them up, and made them interview me in front of 300 people.
Yeah.
So if they were gonna lie, they were gonna lie to more people than me. Well, they couldn't. You know, I spent the day up there asserting the right, telling people do what you do with love in your heart, because more than likely you're gonna succeed if you're doing it out of love rather than hate. But you know, in the papers, the only thing they could do to us, and it's funny, my aunt clipped one of these newspaper clippings out, and she wanted to get the whole thing, the picture and the article and everything. And I looked at it, and I go, absolutely deviantly clever. They went and took a picture of an old gentleman with gray hair. For someone who may not know what Sheriff Joe looks like, may just assume that was Sheriff Joe, sitting at a bar with about a dozen beer bottles in front of him, and it was right sandwiched next to the article. The picture was for a completely different article. They had, you know, arranged the paper and put it up against the written article to make it look like our Second Amendment rally with Sheriff Joe included, you know, a night out at the bar, and, you know? So, that's all they could do though.
Right.
But they are out to get us. They are not going to give an honest representation of the activity, whether it's hunting, an honest discussion on the Second Amendment. We got a lot of press problems.
Well, then the narrative, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The narrative is the most important thing. That's the thing that influences society. You know, whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It influences people because that's what they see every day. Then if the narrative says, you know, I used this before, all red cars are faster than all other cars. Red cars are faster than all other cars. And you're told that every single day. Red cars are faster. Red cars. From the day you're a little kid to the time you grow up. Well, at some point you realize, logically, that red cars really aren't faster. They're not building more horsepower in red cars. But that's the narrative. That's the landscape you were raised with. It's in the back of your mind. Somehow you think. So you go and you're buying a car. You want a safe car for your family. Now you got two little kids in car seats, right? Are you going to buy the red car? Because you somehow subconsciously you might think that it is actually going to be fast. So it's a silly scenario, but it's true. The way they set the narrative, they can make you believe anything. So Maxwell House, good to the last drop. Is it really good to the last drop? I mean, do we really know this? You know.
And you deserve a break today.
Right. Or I'm loving it. You know, McDonald's. Are you really loving it? I mean, it's not that good.
Yeah. Well, they do. They get out there, they repeat it over and over and over again. They get celebrities and all kinds of fancy people up there, and they repeat it. And it does. It soaks in. And, you know, we've become very lethargic and apathetic people. I remember, you know, reading in the history books, and I could just imagine that at the time, back in the days when things were settled, people had a thirst for information. They met at taverns. They engaged each other in real meaningful discussions, and they pursued information aggressively. Now, I mean, the internet's a great thing, and it could be an incredible tool for what we're doing. But at the same time, boy, yeah, I mean, they're not researching the right things. They're going online and playing games. It's unbelievable. You know, we need soldiers.
You know? We're being censored on Facebook.
Yeah, and watched and monitored, and you know, that's a problem. When we do go out and try, you know, nonviolent activism, you know, the powers that be want those guns so bad. You know, they come after us in every way. We look at Facebook, YouTube, all of those popular ways of communication, and we're being filtered horribly right now.
The good news is, the last 2 years have brought me around the country meeting a lot of people, and I can tell you this, that there are patriots, strong patriots across this country, people who are really committed to preserving our rights and respecting our Constitution and helping other people understand it. So the good news is we're not alone. There's a rising swell of people who are patriots in this country.
They're getting pinched, and you know, people wake up sometimes at different rates. sadly, they gotta
Right.
get pinched and lose something
Yes.
many times.
Right.
I hope we're getting to that breaking point where, you know, they've seen their neighbors and loved ones lose enough that they get out there and join us on this. Have we got anyone
I have a
collecting?
question.
Yeah.
How can we change the narrative when somebody hits us with, you know, a slick,
Oh,
Question.
one of the slick ones.
yeah, how can we change the
I
narrative?
always think it's fun and it's helpful to put them on the other side of the question. So when they ask you a question, well, statistics show that, you know, gun violence and blah, 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 the idea of questioning their statistics, questioning their source,
Right.
will put them on their heels a little bit and help you gain a little bit more of the conversation.
Well,
Because
show me where it says that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people try to like we were talking about this earlier. I think we used the term assault weapon. You know, it's a horrible thing because it came into the conversation in the 90s when anti-gun politicians, Dianne Feinstein and her ilk
Yeah,
started bringing it into the conversation. Now they use that term all the time. Now assault weapon. I'll go to the range, and gun owners are using the term. It's
ridiculous.
terrible.
It's not
But-
even a real term.
But when they use that term assault weapon, they don't know what it is. And so a lot of times what I'll ask people is, well, since there's such a vast number of definitions of assault weapon, some people will say it's a semi-automatic, some people say it's an automatic, it has a pistol grip, it has a muzzle brake, it has a scope, it has a magazine capacity of 10 or whatever. Because I don't understand what an assault weapon is, Mr. or Mrs. Anti-Gunner. Just so we're on the same page, would you define assault weapon for me? Go.
Put it back on him.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to define it. They don't even know what they're talking about most of the time. And but the problem is we passively accept this barrage of anti-gun rhetoric and propaganda, and we take it because we're the passive ones. We're not the aggressors in this. You know, we didn't start this battle, but we'll engage if we must. And I think now we're starting to engage. It's in conversation, and we're putting them back on their heels a little bit because we're questioning them.
Yeah.
We're turning the tables.
You know what's both good and bad is what happened just recently with the bump stock ban. The good is that only 4 people turned in a bump stock or a trigger assembly, and the bad news is that 4 people turned in a bump stock trigger assembly. So
That's right.
shame
Right.
on
Shame
you,
on
4
them.
people. I mean, we've got to have some backbone. What are they going to do? You men and women in fancy suits and fancy hats, they take a vote, they write it down, they publish it, they have the prostitutes blasted around. Well, what if we say no?
Yeah.
I mean, how many millions of guns are there out there, and what are they going to do if the good, law-abiding
just
citizens
say no,
just say
that's-
no?
Well, civil disobedience, huh? You know, I mean, maybe it's time. But you brought up, an interesting, point earlier when you're talking about we're not the aggressors. And that made me think right away of one of the reasons that we're in this difficult situation now is because in the past, we've held the position that, look, just leave me alone. I just want to live my life.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bother you. You live your life the way you want to live. You leave me alone. So we've always kind of stayed quiet and stayed in the background. And it's kind of allowed us to be overrun because we weren't pushing back way back then. You know, when
And I've often said that, a lot of that demographic of people are more conservative leaning, and
Yes.
because of that, they're not the ones out there wearing funny pink hats and
Right.
screaming and yelling and going crazy. They're more reserved. And, that's worked against us. It really has. There's a time that we've got to use our voice, whether it shakes or not.
Right.
You've got to get out there and begin asserting because
Right,
it's too late.
and do you have a question?
Sorry. you guys were very heavy in conversation. Well, I had a really big question. It's like, in very simple, plain English, it's like, who is the militia? What does the militia like consist of, and like, how do we know all the other fine details of it? And just, you know, us as Americans, like, what is the militia, and like, what does it break down to in the simplest terms?
You know, it's
I was
really
really
been
curious.
blurred because as Lynn
That's why
referred to
I'm feeling the
earlier,
same way. Like,
the- the National Guard is now considered our
Recognized.
official state's militia. You know, at the complete control and behest of the governor. They spend a lot of their time over in foreign lands. They're guarding the
Right.
wrong lands, first of all. But you've got, it's a very detailed discussion about regulated and unregulated militia. There's a difference there. I think it's a sentiment. It either lives in you or it doesn't. It scares most people, and it
Right.
shouldn't. Do you think we'll ever see a
Right.
revitalized
Right.
militia?
Well, I would hope so, but it's gonna be very difficult, because there's so much we're dealing with now. You know, and to get the people to understand what the militia is really all about, I think would be a hard chore. But to answer your question, the militia today is really the quote-unquote, which really, it isn't really real, but it's the unorganized. We're all part of the unorganized militia.
so pretty much, we the people, like,
We,
as
the people, are
We
the
are.
quote-unquote unorganized militia. But we don't have any power. We don't have any authority. We don't have the ability to do anything. We don't get a legal recognition or support, which is why the militia was never put on the border. That would have handled that immigration problem like that, right? But I will tell you that if you go online and search for some books by a fellow by the name of Edwin Vieira Jr. He's an attorney, and he is a scholar on the militia. He was a Harvard professor and all this, so a good kind of stuff. He has written a couple of really good books, and one of them is entitled Constitutional Homeland Security. And in that, it's all about the militia and how the militia existed even before the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation. That was how the law, law and order was kept, because it was the militia, it was these men in the cities and the towns that when everything happened, they got together. And every state had their own militia. It's the militia of the several states. It's the Virginia state militia, the Massachusetts state militia, the Louisiana. So he wrote this book called Constitutional Homeland Security. His name was Edwin Vieira Jr. And in that book, he tells us how to reconstitute the militia, what needs to be done in order to revitalize the militia. The other source that I suggest that you look at is you go on Facebook and you search for Daniel Vincent McGonigal. He is another expert on the militia, and he's always posting things about the militia and about what we need to do.
Yeah, he's right in Boston. He's a student of Edwin Vieira too.
Yes, he is.
And that was
right.
a perfect segue, because I promised that I was going to give away a copy of some of my shows, and wouldn't you know, it used to be an hour show, and it's all I had. I called up Dr. Edwin Vieira one day
Yeah.
to do the show. I look up at the clock, and it's like an hour and 40 minutes gone by. I say, well, we're doing a 2-hour episode today, I guess. So, right here,
Thank you, sir.
2 hours Edwin Vieira.
I was hoping for the pink page, but I'll take it. Let's just play.
Well, here I tell you what, since you get a free CD, I want you to model these, because before we
Really?
finish the show,
Well,
slip those right on, and we're going to show everybody. All right, did we get any questions from the streaming audience? Is there any other?
It keeps dropping.
Is there any other questions that anyone has for the
Oh my
guests?
gosh, look at that.
I have another
Yes, that's happening.
question.
Good times.
Good job, Chris.
Yeah.
I work in a
Represent.
facility, where they have, a drill in case, an active shooter comes into the
That's a little
building.
weird
It's
now.
it's a facility with 30 women, and I feel unsafe in this house, okay? What can we do to get things changed? I mean, really, okay? I mean, it's, I get a lot from every book I read, but I still want some change. I want things to actually change. So what do? I don't feel safe in the house that I work at. Guns are not allowed, but I'm gonna tell you, I carry. Even though I'm not supposed to.
I would always say that the narrative has to change and society has to change. The way we think about guns has to change, and that's going to take a while. You know,
But I think in a person's position like this, do you sacrifice your right, give it up, or do you assert that right and protect yourself? I mean, there's people that are left with that decision every day
all the
when they
time,
go
all
to
the time.
work.
Yeah.
Myself, I won't acquiesce. I protect myself always.
What's that saying? I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 12?
by 6.
Yeah.
Or carried by 6?
Yeah.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Amen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is, hour flew by fast and think we've already
Can I
gone
say
over
one
now.
more thing?
You absolutely can.
On your book, I just want to add something about your book. You have all those statistics in the back of it. There's an amazing amount of statistics in the back of this book. The other thing I also wanted to bring up, the CDC recently discovered,
Oh, yes.
you want to
No, you go.
talk?
Go ahead.
No, but you're the stat,
No.
You're
Go
stats
ahead.
guy,
I'll
not me.
jump in. I'll jump in.
Oh, you jump in, okay, because I'm bad with statistics, but there was an announcement a few days ago that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, that, does all these statistics on homicides and murder, and blah, blah, and blah, right? Now, for years, there's been this this butting of the head between statisticians about how many defensive gun uses there really are, okay? And the human violence people, not anti-gunners, the human violence people, have been saying because the gun community has been saying, look, there have been, 2 million to 2.5 million proper, legal, defensive gun uses in this country, and where the number of murders and homicides and stuff is down to like equal to what the automobile does, 60,000 or 65,000. Like, how can how does that compute together? But for years and years and years and years, they say, oh no, your numbers are wrong. That Gates guy, he did the wrong thing, and even John Lott with his more guns, less crime book. Oh, they came and they attacked him so bad, and they don't believe his numbers. Well, the CDC, which is what the human violence people use their numbers, right? They are all pulling up the FBI numbers and the CDC numbers, right? The CDC discovered recently some data and some analysis and statistics that they had used years ago that support our claim of the 2 million defensive gun uses. And they just, am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
They just did, so we're right about that.
2.46 million times on average a year. This was the study that was done in the 90s. They did a study from 96 to 98, I think it was, and the results never made the light of day until now, which showed that self-defense gun usage was used on an average of 2.46 million times per year. Now, this doesn't mean that people are killing people. This just means sometimes the mere presence of a gun
Just telling them what
will
wrong.
deter
Yes.
a crime.
Or they just brandish it
Yeah.
and
You
the
know?
bad guy runs away.
So that's a fantastic thing. You know, that's a statistic that everyone should be talking about.
Yeah,
But,
just
you know,
bury.
Well, and you talked about the CDC being their go-to.
Right.
Stanford University did a study that showed killers choose gun-free zones 70% of the time. And of the other 30% of the time where crimes were committed in areas where guns were allowed, a third of those were stopped by guess who? A good guy with a gun.
Good guy with a gun, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a trend I like to see continue. There's a lot of problems out there in the world, and you know, anytime you can defend and save another's life, it's noteworthy. And you know, bad people do bad things. You can't regulate for evil. We've got to change the narrative. Take the not fall for the words that they use. They're constantly getting us to debate things using their own terms that have been redefined. We've got to stop doing that. Our groups and organizations, we have got to come together with a cohesive, single message somehow. We are, these leaders in these groups have got to put their pride aside. You know, it's not about who's in charge and gets the most kudos. It's about getting the work done. As LaVoy Finicum's tagline is, you know, let's get to work, and it matters how you stand. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we've been sitting on our hands long enough. We should all be well rested. You know, we haven't done much to protect our Second Amendment right, but it's now or never. It's honestly out. We are looking right now at that generation that is in school. That's going to be the generation that's going to give us away.
Getting brainwashed.
If we don't, and that's been my thing, how do you reach out to the youth? And I haven't cracked that nut yet, but boy, I'm going to keep trying.
Dave, you're doing a great job, though. You're speaking out. I watch you on your videos and stuff, and you're doing a fantastic job.
Well, I
Yes.
appreciate that. I hope some of the young folks out there are paying attention. I got a couple of cubs of my own, and boy, I'm fearful of the world they're about to inherit.
Well, we gotta get these kids to the range. I mean, what happened to the youth programs in the rifle programs in the schools, right?
I
We
used
gotta
to bring my
start-
shotgun to school right in the back window of my truck when I was in high school.
I've taken my granddaughters, I've taken one of my granddaughters, how many grandkids do we have? 12? Yeah, so I've taken the oldest one to the range. I've taken the other two to the range, not the guns yet because they're really small and little, but we did the archery. But the thing is, you start getting these kids, you bring them to the range, and then they go back to school, and they're all talking about it.
So they got those phones and selfies and pictures now to share around,
yes,
right?
and my granddaughter, I took a picture of my granddaughter, she said, she's talking to everybody in school about the fact that she went to the range with her grandmother, and she knows how to shoot a rifle, and they were all like, you did what? You did what? Can we go too? Can we go too? I said, yes, anytime they want to come, we contact their parents and we'll go down.
Excellent.
You know, but that's the thing, we gotta start focusing on getting the teenagers into the gun range. I'm sure this gun range has a youth group like it. I know Braintree Rifle Pistol has a Friday night, youth.
There is an outreach to the young people here, and a lot of the clubs are doing that now, and I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
Well, you do some very good work with the ladies out there. What's your website, and how can the mama bears get involved?
The website is the number 2, the letter A, 2A Sisters, MA, meaning 2A Sisters of Massachusetts. So it's the number 2A Sisters MA.org. That's our website. And you just go onto the website and send me a little message, and I'll get back to you and tell you about how you can get involved with us and what we're
We
doing.
got the classes and stuff going on, and they'll be able to hook into that.
Yep.
Now, Dan's got a couple of books here. There's that Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. That's the first book. And Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. What's the website where folks can get these at, Dan?
goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com. And on there, there's links to the blog, lots of articles. I'm always writing articles. And there's a media page where you can see all the lots of interviews and radio interviews, NRA TV interviews. And so the media page is really good. Lots of photos of, book signings and fans and friends. And so goodgunbadguy.net, goodgunbadguy.com, or search Good Gun Bad Guy on Amazon.
Excellent. Now, you're going to be coming out again this year for the rally. Is
Yeah.
there, give the folks a little hint of what you might be talking about, or are we going to save that as a surprise for the day?
We'll talk about guns and stuff.
Stuff. And I promise to try to be lively and not let y'all fall asleep. It's going to be another great rally. We got the Bundys, Anthony Ryan Bundy coming out. Larry Pratt again from Gun Owners of America. He's come out every year. He loves the event. Sheriff Richard Mack. And we got some great, your friend Christopher Pinto
Chris Pinto's gonna be
from
there.
Mass
Yeah,
Gun
Mass
Rights
Gun
is going to
Rights.
be
Yep.
out again.
Yep.
So it's going to be another great show.
Yeah.
If anyone out there would like to help out, this is a big event. This here is a fundraising show that we're doing here tonight. It's too bad y'all couldn't make it, those of you that are watching. But if you do want to contribute and help out, feel free to, just write a check to the club here and earmark it to a rally so they know how to handle it. No one here is getting rich. It costs a lot of money to put these events on, fly these folks out, provide them lodging, and get them back home again safely. So it really is a group effort. It's your rally. I just happen to be the instigator of it. Lynn, thank you so
My
much for coming
pleasure.
on the show.
My
It's
pleasure.
always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
always.
You're not afraid to yell and wag your finger. That's why I like you. Dan, thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming
man.
down from New York to help us out. Thank everyone who came out for the show tonight, everyone who's watching back there. As always, do what you do with love in your heart. Fly your flags high, keep your powder dry, and we'll see you on the next show.